Awesome, man. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm psyched to be here. Podcast guest number 2. Love it.
No, it's super cool. I think I started off with Laura just admiring Miami.
Yeah,
And
it is great.
How cool it's been.
Yeah.
In the Bay, like, I didn't go out too much, but I appreciate Miami in the sense that whenever I'm off the computer, I can go outside and there's sunshine. But it's just been cool how many founders are in Brickell and how many people I've met. I've been super inspired by it all.
Yeah, I think Miami's great. I have this recurring debate with myself about whether you need to be in a colder place to get more things done.
Yeah.
Because if it's cold, you're forced to be inside and work versus being in a place that's kind of nice and sunny and where you can go outside. I actually find initially I was of the opinion that you had to be somewhere colder and like I would be more productive being somewhere like New York.
Yeah.
But now I've come around more to the opinion that I think I'm more productive here because I can go outside for a run in the middle of the day, get some vitamin D. Like my mood is just overall better
100%.
with the sun.
100%.
And I think that makes me better for other people to deal with too.
Oh, I would totally agree. I didn't realize, I mean, I guess just because in the summers, like you get that bit of sunshine and it goes away, like how much like it actually affects you.
Yeah.
But just having like the constant warmth, it really is awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
I first noticed it coming from like I went from Melbourne moved up to Sydney, and then in Sydney in the middle of winter you still wander around in a t-shirt and shorts. It's unbelievable.
That is awesome. I'm jealous. So I just kind of wanted to start it a little bit about more so like on a high level, like who are you, a little bit about your background, and just start from there.
Okay. Well, to take it from the top, so my name's Sid. I co-founded a DeFi lending protocol called Maple Finance.
Nice. We
call it an institutional lending platform built on top of the Ethereum blockchain.
Okay.
And soon to be the Solana blockchain.
Hell yeah.
Which we're super excited about. But if you think about it and actually unpack what that means, it's like a platform for running debt funds or lending businesses on chain. So we are out of the box tooling that you can use to run a lending business on chain.
Nice.
My background was actually in that space. So I was TradFi. I wasn't technical. I used to work in banking and I would do corporate bond issuance and securitize bonds. And I was always working with very entrepreneurial clients. And so I always enjoyed seeing that side of the business. And I always wanted to learn how to like run my own business.
Yeah.
And so I went from being deal side, like helping businesses to issue debt to debt capital markets, to going client side, which meant actually working inside one of these businesses to help run their treasury and manage their relationships. And so that was kind of where I started seeing how difficult it is for companies to actually access debt from investors and from markets that they need to grow.
For sure.
And that was really the initial, like that was the genesis of the idea for Maple.
That's a super wild story. I think one of the biggest things is you're kind of like had the previous background knowledge of the banking system. Yeah. But the other thing that you also had that I find super impressive is the knowledge on like crypto and like how you kind of merge those two, because I know how many hours I had to put in to like learn everything on chain and just learn about the different L1s and L2s and just the entire space. And the fact that you, one, had the banking knowledge, but then two, were able to kind of see the utility in blockchains and then able to marry those together is super impressive. So could you kind of touch upon how you kind of got your crypto knowledge? Yeah,
sure. So it was probably 2018. So mid 2018, I was, I'd been putting together like a banking facility at that company, and I started learning about smart contracts. And so I got into crypto by first being into smart contracts and thinking, could we do tokenized debt? Could I effectively do what I was doing in banking on chain using smart contracts?
Yeah.
And this was in Australia. And there was nobody doing this. So it was like research through Google, and then looking at what were the kind of the cutting edge smart contracts that were looking at like derivatives, or the idea of could you do bonds on chain?
Yeah.
And so it progressed organically from talking to first law firms in Australia, and then I started learning about decentralized finance. Nice. And decentralized finance was kind of maybe 3 or 4 teams at the time. There was Maker. I think Compound was just beginning around early 2019.
Yeah.
And then there was Set Protocol, and then also Dharma was trying to do peer-to-peer lending
Yep.
at
I
the
remember
time
all
on
those.
chain. Yeah. And so DeFi was literally less than 5 projects. And so I started reaching out and talking to those founders. And then it was early 2019 that I started writing a white paper, which was very non-technical because I was from the finance background. But that's what got me to think about the different mechanisms of how you could do tokenized debt.
Okay.
And that initially kind of concerned tranching. So it looked kind of similar to Ondo and to Barnbridge today. And it was going to allow companies to borrow and to tokenize, effectively tokenize bonds and then tranche them out.
Okay.
But what we found was, there wasn't the infrastructure or the support around it to actually do something like this. And so, continuing my research, we tried to build a proof of concept in mid 2019.
Okay.
And this was working with an Australian software development company.
Yeah.
And what we produced was very basic, but it was built on top of Compound. And so it used Compound as yield generating assets. So this is really trite to say, but we needed yield generating and assets in DeFi that could be tokenized and then used as collateral to tranche out bonds.
Yeah.
And there was no yield generating assets in DeFi that we could use. So we ended up settling on CDAI, which was Compound's version of interest accruing DAI. And now you look, and DeFi is all about yield, and every project is trying to capitalize on that. So that was kind of funny to look back on.
That is crazy. You guys were ahead of the time.
Yeah, but then we had to pivot. So nobody liked this idea, and they thought it was too early and that DeFi wasn't going to take off. So then we pivoted and we started doing peer-to-peer loans, but peer-to-peer loans suck.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to aggregate the capital. And then when you were dealing with the idea of small borrowers, effectively like retail, you can't underwrite them. The things that cause defaults are things that are very hard to predict. It's like divorce, sickness, loss of job.
Yeah.
And so they're inherently riskier. And so we went for about 4 months trying to build this proof of concept platform in early 2020, and VCs wouldn't take my calls, and everybody was very bearish on this idea. And we went through a period that I kind of look back on now as like the wilderness. I'd go out running and think, far out, like this idea is never going to take off. Like, am I wasting my time?
Yeah.
And then it was just working through kind of the mental labyrinth of this idea that we started thinking about pooling. So me and my co-founder would then discuss this, and he's someone I met in TradFi. We worked together at that commercial lending company. So we started talking about pooling liquidity so that it would be very easy to access loans because the liquidity would always be there. That was the pitfall of peer-to-peer loans, right?
Yeah.
Is you can't find people who could underwrite the loans and go, I'll have a bit of that one, I'll have a bit of that one, and a bit of that one.
Yeah.
And so, it was mid 2020, we pivoted to what we are now, which was a pool of liquidity that could fund the loans.
Okay.
And then the idea of tranching it out so that you had like a subordinated reserve that would give protection to people who are lending there.
So for someone that's not super familiar with the tranches, could you go a little bit deeper into that?
Sure. So the idea of a tranche is you have somebody who is lending on Maple, and so they are depositing stablecoins into a pool. Those stablecoins are funding a loan.
Okay.
They are exposed to the risk of borrowers in that pool defaulting on the loans.
Okay.
So a pool of 20 loans, if 2 borrowers default, then that's going to trigger a loss for the people who had lent money into the pool.
Gotcha.
The idea of tranching is that what you do is you find some people who are going to take more risk, and you put them at a position where they will incur the losses before the others who are lending in the pool. So they're subordinated.
I see.
So you have a senior tranche and a junior tranche. The junior tranche cops the loss first, but they get paid more for doing so because they bear more risk. So
is that
Ray Dalio's concept of more risk, more reward. Right?
That's awesome. Is that traditional in the banking industry, or is that something that you came up with?
No, it's part of what you would call the debt stack.
Okay.
So you'd have senior lenders who are going to get paid first if anything goes wrong. Yeah. And then you have mezzanine lenders who typically sit in the middle. And then you have subordinate or first loss lenders.
Interesting.
Who incur loss first.
And you were able to put this all on chain.
Yeah, and that was actually kind of the idea of the name Maple was we always dealt with the debt stacks. You'd have the senior lenders, the mezzanine lenders, and the junior lenders. And so we called it the debt stack. And then you would have the cash flow waterfall where you pay senior first, then you pay the mayors, and then you pay the junior creditors or debt holders. And I always found this really unappealing and unmemorable, right? So when when I was thinking about it, I would start to think about it like a stack of pancakes, and then you have maple syrup kind of flowing over the top. And for me, from a marketing perspective, I always wanted a single name that people could remember, and that eventually we could try and make a verb.
I like that a lot. I mean, I think naming is extremely important. And the fact that you were able to come up with something relatively simple to pronounce and that is directly tied into your product, I think is remarkable. That's super impressive.
Thanks. It was, I think like the other benefit of it is that we wanted something that was kind of warm and evocative.
Yeah.
Singular word. And then I think a lot of startups get this wrong these days, but they take a word and then they spell it differently to how it sounds. Yeah. And then whenever you tell someone about your startup and they go to Google it, they're not going to be able to Google it. And they're not going to remember your email either.
That is brilliant. That's super interesting and impressive. One of the things that you touched upon that we've talked about in the past, I think is more so about like kind of seemingly obvious ideas, but not so obvious. Or only in like hindsight, like everybody's like, oh yeah, you would definitely do that. Like anybody would have built that. But at the time, everybody kind of calls you crazy. Can you touch more a little bit on that part?
Yeah. So under collateralized lending is now, people say it was kind of obvious, but at the time people were saying, no, you can't do under collateralized lending because it's not trustless. Everything in crypto needs to be trustless. Yeah. And where particularly in DeFi. And so I think our initial, like if we have a singular innovation, it was the idea that you could actually have trusted parties and you could use the blockchain as a tool to construct incentives and feedback loops that would ensure that they did a good job in underwriting. Underwriting being, approving good borrowers. Yeah. And so so the way that we incorporated that is that we require pool delegates to be in that subordinated tranche. Sure. So they need to deposit money and they will lose money first if there are defaults because they approved bad borrowers. Okay. And then the other thing we did was we gave them a portion of the fees so that they're actually incentivized to underwrite on behalf of other lenders who are depositing into the pools. I see. Because that was the issue we were going to have is if we did a straight peer-to-peer lending platform, most people don't have the expertise or the time or the inclination to go and like look at other borrowers' financials. Yeah. And borrowers don't want to dox themselves to the whole world. Like if you're a really successful company, you don't want to just go sharing your financials with everyone. Very true. Whereas they only have to share it like confidentially with the pool delegate. So that was the insight was you could construct this. Yeah. You could have under collateralized loans because you could have a protocol which was not trustless at a microcosm. So I think about trustlessness occurring at different scales or decentralization occurring at different scales. Yeah. Now, for a singular pool, it's not decentralized necessarily because you have a pool delegate making the decisions. Okay. But at a protocol level, you have multiple pool delegates, and so no one pool delegate exercises an outsized influence on the overall platform.
That makes sense.
It is decentralized at a macro scale.
Yeah. And it seems all obvious now, but it was definitely, just like peeling apart those individual parts and trying to string them all together, it's very difficult. Yeah.
Well, the in terms of the idea maze, like where we were early in 2020, where we were doing peer-to-peer loans, and there were individuals looking to borrow. Now, we had to shift and say, well, actually, let's look at institutions, because institutions are going to be lower risk. They'll put their reputation behind it, so they're willing to be known, KYC'd. You can underwrite them at scale. Like it actually doesn't take much longer to do a $10 million loan as to assess a $10,000 loan to an individual because there's actually so much uncertainty with an individual. Yeah. Whereas with a business, you can see their financial performance from the last 6, 12, 18 months.
For sure.
And so that was one of the actual insights where we flipped a switch and we're like, okay, let's just go after institutions.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's wild, dude. I admire that. It's super impressive just being able to, I think, peel apart the individual parts and then put them back together and create something. That is hard. So that's super cool.
Well, I often think that there's no really bad ideas. There's just bad execution. And so any idea can actually be executed on if you find the right niche or wedge or way of doing it.
I totally agree. I guess to like jump off from that point, one of the things I got invited to a maple breakfast, and during that, I think again, like I was impressed by just your speaking abilities and your ability to, kind of execute. I don't say that often, and I was truly impressed. And I guess jumping from there, like, how did you like kind of like gain your skills over time as like a leader or a founder, or being able to kind of like one, like see your vision and then like move forward in that direction?
Okay. Interesting kind of two-part question, because I have some views on the idea of a skill stack, which is something that I've heard Scott Adams and also people like Shane Parrish from Farnham Street talk about quite well and articulately. And this is the idea that you don't have to be the best in the world at any one thing. If you can be sort of like 80th percentile or above in let's say 3 skills, and 3 skills that kind of like are uniquely suited to what you do. And so if I look at my skill set, it would have been financial knowledge of crypto, and then let's say kind of management or maybe public speaking. I couldn't originally communicate super well, but just practice, you build it up over time, talking on interviews and podcasts and events. But what I would say the skill set I built up. So I already had kind of the financial knowledge. I'd done finance at university, then career in banking. But then I think one of the things I focus on a lot is actually organizational structure and management and decision making. And so this is something I think about a lot, and I listen to a lot of podcasts on it. And it's how do you actually build an organization that is going to be effective such that I can gradually obsolete myself in that, and then what is my, at the end of the day then, what kind of skill set or function am I serving at the organization that is Maple? And so initially I was having to do bits of everything, but now I think increasingly it's assembling a good executive and leadership team and then giving them the context that they need to go and succeed on something. Like, I read a lot of history and biographies, and I think one of the really impressive military commanders, Napoleon's probably a favorite, but was Nelson. And so one of the things that he's actually known for was he would give his leadership team really good context on what they were trying to achieve, so that if he was separated and not able to communicate directly with them, they would still have an idea of what they needed to go do, and so they could make autonomous decisions.
I like that.
And so if you give your executive team or your leadership team context on what the outcome is, then you enable them to make mistakes on the way to get there, but they'll still work their way there. They just don't need your input at every little fork in the road.
That's awesome. How did you even, I guess like one of the things that I'm super interested in is just like how do you even like know what to study? Like that's like kind of like a hard question. So like you name those 3, but like how did you even come or like touch upon those 3? Like it was just like over time something that you had to like, these were the most important 3 things and I need to kind of execute on those.
That's actually a tough question, because it's kind of just the accumulation of reading. So you read a lot over time, and then you get good at identifying patterns and correlations or connections between things, and then you can decide which rabbit holes you need to go deeper down. There are some really good books on psychology and decision making, and that's like you read a couple of them, and then they'll have anecdotes and vignettes in them, and then you kind of follow those threads. So you might read about an example, or you'll get a reference for some other book, or you'll then listen to that author on a podcast, and he'll talk about other books that inspired him. I would say on the subject of management, I think I was actually giving a couple of recommendations the other day, but I think one of the best books on management is probably High Output Management by Andy Grove, which is the Intel CEO. Because it's so simple. He boils down running a company to the metaphor of running a breakfast operation at a hotel.
I love that. I read that one.
Then from there, I started reading a couple of articles actually the other day on like the Toyota production system, which is, it's just a different way of using the same technology. And it boils down to the same metaphor. Like you have inputs, you have then a transformation that occurs in the business, you have outputs, and then you need to sell those outputs. And whether it's whether you're in the knowledge economy or you're manufacturing widgets or cars, that process basically holds for all businesses.
Yeah.
And so I think what's important about reading is reading gives you the framework to evaluate, how to make decisions, and it gives you examples to use. But the important thing is actually then sitting down and reflecting on it. Like if you are constantly consuming books, but you're never reflecting on what you read, you're not going to be much better off.
This is a great point. I think because I'm trying to tweet a little bit more, but I would say largely still learning.
Yeah.
But I feel like all my best tweets is like after a day of like large reading and then laying in bed, and then your mind's just resting and reflecting. And then you can actually like kind of process that information. So that is it's the idea of diffuse thinking versus concentrated thinking, and it's when your mind switches off, it goes into diffuse mode, and it finds connections between things you read. But I have the same experience where if I spend a Saturday or Sunday morning like reading blog articles and then thinking and kind of digesting things and disconnecting from Telegram a bit, that's when I find I have my most original thoughts. That's awesome. It's much needed. I think to kind of like bring it back to like crypto. So that was, you kind of did a bunch. You went to VCs, they didn't really fund it. You were using comp, and you kind of had to switch your business model and large, correct? And then that was the mid 2020s was all the stuff that was with like DeFi Summer and composability. So just kind of like, I think it would be cool to hear from you, like what happened like after DeFi Summer, or were you guys a part of like DeFi Summer? When did you like officially launch? Just kind of like run us through those events.
So a good idea without the environment or the context that can actually accommodate it won't succeed. And so a few things happened simultaneously. So around June, July, we had the breakthrough in the idea of using pools. So that, took the insight that was circulating DeFi at the time, that, you had AMMs, and the idea that aggregated liquidity was kind of fundamentally different than diffuse liquidity. And I think that was an insight not previously understood that well. And so that prompted us to look at, lending pools that could then house a bunch of capital, so you could actually do loans on demand if borrowers needed it in size. And then the idea that actually tokens were better, because you could use tokens to align the incentives of participants, allocate risk. So in our case, tokens are part of the denomination of that subordinated reserve. And so the pool delegate needs to stake tokens. And then, we also want to use that to like incentivize lenders. But that was the other idea. 12 months prior to that, everyone was saying projects shouldn't have tokens. So that was a total 180. So anyway, around June, July, you have renewed interest in DeFi, and that then created an environment in which we were able to fundraise. So what we did was we then found advisors. Like, it was actually a very quick decision and capitalizing on an opportunity. So we could see renewed interest in DeFi. We could see other projects that were starting to raise. And so we started talking in our network. We found 2 advisors, and then we got a deck together, and we started getting intros to VCs. And so I spent about a week and a half period just not sleeping, just pitching every time zone, and then just napping in between calls. And so I'd wake up at like 4 a.m. I'd go and talk to the US. Then Asia would come online mid-morning for us in Australia, and then I'd spend a few hours pitching there, and then take a nap, and then pitch Europe in the evening. And I did that for about a week and a half. And it's like a watershed moment when you get your first person who's like, okay, I'll actually commit a check to this. He's like, somebody actually believes in our project now and is trusting us with money, versus, people not wanting to call you back, or they give you an answer like, okay, come back, like, let's chat when you have like, a more fleshed out idea, and you're like, this is it, this is the idea. So anyway, so that was around August, September. And then so September 2020, we closed the initial seed round, and then we started hiring. So initially it was me and my co-founder, and then we had to make our first full-time hire in October. And then we quickly built out the team. So then we're having to learn, how do you do hiring properly? How do you do proper job descriptions? Where do you post them to get the most impact? How do you run a good candidate process?
Yeah.
And then, so that took us through to about April, May. And so in May 2021, we launched. And so in the lead up, like I breezed through that, but there was a lead up period where we had to hire a few significant, really significant people. So we brought on both of our tech leads. So Chad, who leads the off-chain side of things, Lucas, who leads smart contract development.
Yeah.
And then we launched in May with our first pool of like 17 million in loans.
That's crazy.
That was the first 17 million. We've now done about 900 million since then.
That's nuts.
But
I think, I mean, there was a lot in there, but just how quickly, once you actually raised that, you were actually to like get the ball rolling, build the MVP, launch it, get dollars in the protocol, and continue to iterate there, all while hiring a team and building the system that needs to take place to build Maple as a whole.
I think, and one of the things I see is that in the Twitter space and in the Twitter sphere, even in Discord and in Telegram groups, there's not as much activity that's kind of legible from. So if I say most of my day is recruiting, managing our team, kind of doing marketing and sales. So there's a lot that goes into running this business, and not a lot of that is actually legible to people who are in Telegram or in Discord or on Twitter. And so what you find is that what they focus on are things that are a little bit kind of tangential to that. Like there's probably an overweighted focus on things like liquidity mining, for example. And I think this is the case for a lot of projects where it's like what is visible is counted a lot more than what is invisible. Like how are they building the team? How are they planning product?
I think that's a great point. And I think this is kind of unique to maybe the crypto space because people are much more, I would say, kind of involved or with the community aspect. It brings in a different group of stakeholders that in, say, a private company or a public company executing on like a specific product feature would not have to think about. And that's super interesting, just the other stakeholders that Web3 presents and how you have to kind of loop them in and keep them engaged and kind of active into the community, but also learning how to kind of juggle a new stakeholder. That's a lot.
Yeah, you have this internal sphere that's internal to your core team and immediate high frequency customers and that circle, and then you have kind of the external facing modes of communication where you have to be equally on top of, but where very different things are prioritized. So I think what we've found and what we've tried to do is give sort of fairly frequent updates, like an in case you missed it newsletter that our marketing manager Charlotte puts out every week. But it's trying to keep people who are in the community in the loop with what's going on, because often they see that if something hasn't happened with liquidity mining or with a token or with a sticker pack or something, that like we're not doing anything as a team, and it's like actually a lot is happening behind the scenes. Advice that I try and give to newer founders who are coming along is to try and get their product out as quickly as possible. I see a lot of emphasis on stealth mode. I think stealth mode's garbage. I don't think anyone should ever do stealth mode ever. And I'll go on record as saying that because they miss out on getting their feedback. So I was talking a couple of months back to a project that was saying they're about to come out of stealth mode. Well, what they didn't realize is that there's a dozen other projects doing exactly what they're doing because they thought that they were sitting on alpha, so they stayed in stealth mode, and therefore they missed the fact that there's all these people already doing and kind of learning lessons that they should be learning themselves. Yeah, I love that. From it. I love that. The like two big things that I found personally, or one of them was like, the longer you wait to ship, the higher the likelihood you just don't ship at all. Yes. Or kind of like the magic leap. It becomes this self-reinforcing loop where once you find one excuse not to ship, then it's just easier the second time. You've greased the groove of delaying. Yeah. And so I've seen projects that say, they said they were going to delay for like a week or two. Well, 6 months later, they found 5 other reasons that were really good for them to delay. Just ship it, guys. Exactly. I love that. And then the other thing is just like the number of iterations
or what I've learned, the more iterations that I can do of anything, typically the better I get at that thing. And that goes, I would like to tie it back, like once you ship in public, then you get that immediate feedback, and then you can continue to kind of move forward and actually meaningfully make your product better from like users instead of kind of some high ideas that may or may not work.
Because absolutely. What you need to do is the success of the organization actually depends on building a feedback loop where you can ship a product, identify the most salient pieces that people love about your product and what they don't like, and then capitalize, just go all in. It's like blitzkrieg, right? You just gotta like, as soon as you make a breakthrough, you have to exploit that. So you have to identify the thing that is most salient and most like the killer app part of your product. And then you double down, you go all in on that. But you need a feedback loop. So you need somebody who's then talking to your customers, and then you need to get that feedback back to your dev team, scope what you need to do, and then you go and iterate again. But you exploit, you press the breakthrough.
Dude, I love that. I mean, that is like pretty much kind of what Elon and Tesla like nailed into us. Like create the feedback loop and like do that process over and over and over. And as you can iterate more, you just learn faster. And as you are able to tighten that feedback loop over time, it's just your product gets much better. So no, dude, that's awesome.
I would say in the same way that no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. Your product, as soon as you ship it, like you're immediately going to find things that you regret about it, and then the game is how quickly can you correct those, right? And deprioritize what doesn't need to be corrected or worried about. But biggest feedback to teams is ship faster, and a lot of them also delay because of legal concerns, and they just approach it with too much trepidation. Their biggest risk is not that they're going to get shut down tomorrow. Their biggest risk is that they're going to ship something that makes people snooze.
Dropping fire, man. I totally agree. That's awesome. I guess, I mean, so we kind of touching on like the founder aspect. How have you as a founder kind of embraced the space or learned kind of more throughout the space? You kind of touch on like advice for founders, but dealing or being with a founder yourself, how do you kind of just approach your day-to-day, or not even mental health, but just like how do you take care of yourself and kind of stay on top of everything? Because that's not easy, because you're also juggling all these other things.
I think the biggest single lesson is probably learning to say no to things. So I like to take on a lot of things, and that can mean that my time is a little bit too fragmented. And so increasingly what I'm trying to do is say no to things. I think one practical lesson is we're just bringing on an EA now. So that's at 30 people on the team.
That's awesome.
And what I would say to new founders is actually maybe your sixth hire should probably be an EA. Because if I look back at this, I think there's a stigma about it where it's treated as indulgent for a founder or a CEO of a team that's less than 10 people to have an EA. But if you actually think about it, as founder, right, you're doing BD, you're doing recruitment, you're doing product, you're doing fundraising and investor relations. You need to be hyper-focused on the most important stuff. So to the extent that you're not there scheduling calls, for recruitment, like, have an EA do that for you if you don't already have somebody doing recruiting internally. So I think that's actually, I would say, probably one of the highest leverage hires you could make early on is maybe like your fifth or sixth person on the team should actually be an EA, so that you can better organize your time and also push out that which is not necessary.
Totally.
Because I think it's really hard for you to say no to people. I find that, but if you have a gatekeeper, then it's, you take willpower out of the equation and you give them the right priorities, and then they can execute that for you. But I would say, that's one of the things I learned. So I would say, how to manage your time. What I try and do every day, I will try and do a run or a gym session. I find that kind of helps me keep my energy levels up and keep on top of things. And then I would say, I would say learning to give people context. So instead, I try not to micromanage everything. And instead, I try and understand what's going on, and I try and kind of work through, I guess, in a Socratic method, problem solving with people on the team. So instead of outright saying, here's what I think you should do, it's more like, what do you think we should do? What are the reasons? Or it's in advance of that, here's the outcome we would like to achieve.
Yeah.
You think about how to achieve that, and then ask me any questions that can help unblock you. But here's what would be a great outcome. Here's some like must-have requirements for it. Here's some things we must avoid.
Yeah.
And then you leave it up to the team on how to actually execute on that. Because then what I've found is that there is a temptation to try and solve problems myself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of founders have this, and there's a reluctance to give up trust to other people in the organization. But actually, what you need to do is, as a founder, your success is actually measured by the fitness of your organization. And so what I try and do is, anytime a problem comes to me, I try and think, who can this be delegated to? And if there's no one in the team I can delegate this to, is it going to be something that comes up repeatedly? Because then that means I should probably hire somebody who can do that job.
Yeah.
If it's repeatable and it's something that is going to impact the future success of our business.
Yeah.
If it's a one-off, maybe I just do it myself.
Yeah.
But I think that's been one of the main shifts for me, is not doing it myself, but trying to funnel it to people in the team, because then that in turn clears up my calendar and allows me to focus on what's most important.
Dude, those are all beautiful. It's super impressive just how you think about approaching the problems, how you fix the problems, like how you take care of yourself. Like that's hard.
Yeah, one of the best books on this, I think, it was a recent one that came out last year, and it's called Working Backwards.
Okay.
And it's a book about Amazon's organizational structure and how they go about operations.
I need to add that.
one of the key points in there is Jeff is always thinking about who, then what, when it comes to solving a problem. So it's finding the right person to take care of a problem. And I think in a small way, that's kind of what I'm trying to do when, if something comes in for me, who in the team is handling that, and who in the team is kind of responsible for this area of our success.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. Really good people, really smart people with integrity solve a lot of your problems.
100%. I'm just impressed. A lot of what we did at Tesla as well is we tried to like articulate the problem and then work our way back from there, because I think you're able to see, what you actually need to build. Yeah. Like Tesla was kind of criticized, at least initially, for building like large gigafactories, but they're like, we just did the math, and the math showed that we need a really large factory, so we built a large factory. Yeah. No, that's.
And I think contrarian points are good. Because Tesla in doing that did something totally different, and so it's much easiest to compete if you're going into a totally blue ocean.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people instead kind of focus on ideas that make a lot of sense, and usually if they make a lot of sense, other people are already doing them.
Yeah.
Tesla's quite famous for thinking from first principles, but what they did in deciding to construct the Gigafactory was they worked through, here's our inputs, here's the transformations that occur, here's the outputs.
Yeah.
And then they just worked out where they were going to be constrained, and if it was going to be battery production, well then go ahead and build a battery factory, right? Or the Gigafactory.
Exactly. No, it's
there's one other book I really like is called The Goal by a guy called Eli Goldratt. But it talks about how in that kind of production line, any individual part of that production line that is constrained creates a constraint at the end of your production line. Yeah. And so in Tesla's case, that is like battery construction was going to be a choke point.
Yeah. They always talk about building the machine that builds the machine. Which is super interesting. No, this has been super helpful, and I think will be major knowledge bombs for a lot of founders. So thank you. I think maybe shifting a little bit, touched upon Maple, touched upon your background and founders, but I would like to kind of see more of like your thoughts on like where like the entire DeFi space is going. Maybe after that, just more broadly, kind of like how you see like crypto playing out the next couple of years.
On DeFi, what I think, so a year ago we're at the stage where speaking with TradFi institutions, there was a lot of skepticism around DeFi. I think now there's interest and curiosity. So there's been a real phase shift that I think, is a meaningful, it's a positive mark against DeFi that it's now shifted from being kind of treated as a scam by TradFi to now treated as, there's something interesting happening here.
Yeah.
And, a lot of these teams are now interested in doing like internal pilot projects. And I think that the pace of that shifted was probably faster than I expected. Like I thought it might have taken longer than 12 months, maybe, 2-3 years before we'd see that. But my viewpoint on DeFi overall, and maybe some macro perspective on where I think it's going and where it is at the moment, is that I think of DeFi as a rail system that kind of bridges, one side of the US to the other, if you think about it. So in the 1800s, you had different railway gauges at each state border. And so you had like a lot of different track sizes knitted together. So if you were trying to transport a good from LA to New York, you would have to shift train carriages, like load and unload at various points along the journey. Each of these would add effectively a toll on economic productivity. What DeFi is like a single railway gauge that stretches, from LA to New York for the financial system. So currently what you have in the financial system is you have SWIFT, governs international payments. This is effectively just routing money through different banks through a messaging system. And then frequently it actually has to pass through multiple banks to get, from the sender to the eventual recipient. And this is actually a huge tax on the financial system. And from network, just from like network science, I think if you're able to reduce the latency in a network, like it leads to exponential benefits. And so I think that's what's going to happen to the financial system. So the core permissionless aspect of DeFi that is super powerful is that you can send money from one point in a network to another without having to route it through, like 5 different nodes. Effectively, it's like the shift from post to email.
Exactly.
And so that's where I think the core use of DeFi is it's that layer of infrastructure that is global in nature that, many different people can participate in, and that can facilitate just much more throughput. So that being said, what are some good mental models to think about DeFi as? So think of it kind of like an app store. Now that you have this ability to like send money as well as information to kind of any two people in a network, you can effectively start to build an app store on top of this. Like DeFi is all these different financial products are apps in the app store, which is DeFi. And then those apps can then interact with each other. So, if you're a lender on Maple, you can have a token. That token could be collateral on Aave or Compound, or it could be used in an AMM somehow. So that composability, I think, creates lock-in for the network. And what this is going to do is eventually financial products will have lower customer acquisition costs. So let's just boil it down to a few principles. Base principles, you'll have lower customer acquisition cost running a financial product on DeFi rather than running it on the traditional financial rails, where you have to have relationships with banks in every country that you want to operate in, as well as relationships with like the payment processing networks like Visa and MasterCard. So lower customer acquisition cost. Just a better user experience. Like, yes, sure, it can take 15 seconds to send something on Ethereum, but you have alternative chains now like Solana, Avalanche, where these problems are, this latency is gradually being reduced, and that's leading to a better user experience. And then the incentive alignment and the transparency for people. So I think, on Maple, for example, you can see the performance of loans in real time. That's something that would have taken a lot of cost and been 15 to 30 days after the end of the month in TradFi. So anyway, these things I think combine to make it obvious that all of finance will be shifted onto DeFi in the next sort of 3 to 5 to 7 years. But then what happens from there? So I think everybody eventually does all of their banking and financial livelihood is inside of crypto. Like you have a home loan that maybe comes from Celsius. You're using a debit card where you're spending USDC that your employer paid you. And so I think you won't see a lot of existing financial institutions make the leap to crypto, because it's like saying that all of the big box retailers were going to make the leap to e-commerce. They just didn't. And then they all paid catch up 10 to 15 years after they should have began doing projects. And now some of them who adapted have managed to survive, but you actually have in each major category, you have an e-commerce, native.
Yeah.
I think in each major category, you're going to have crypto native companies. And I think, I kind of made this prediction on a Twitter space the other day, but I think actually you'll see a crypto company, so a crypto native financial institution will end up buying the reduced value TradFi companies for their regulatory licensing.
I see. I would totally believe it. It's amazing just how many friction points are removed and overall how it just lowers the cost dramatically, combined with like the product improvements. It's a very hard competitor. I would not want to be on the TradFi space.
Well, just from a growth perspective, right? Like if you look at a lot of the crypto exchanges at the moment, some of them are out acquiring businesses in new markets they want to enter, and they might be using equity or they might be using cash to do so. But if you are in the crypto sector, you effectively trade at a higher multiple, and that gives you currency to do acquisitions. And particularly if you're buying something in the TradFi sector, they just naturally trade at lower multiples. So you could see, I don't know, maybe a very large exchange that might be publicly listed goes and acquires a very old bank that's trading at like a single digit P/E multiple just to kind of get their regulatory licenses, right? Yeah. Like you could see that happening.
100%. No, it's super impressive. And I mean, I think the other thing I've been thinking about a lot is just how small the total crypto market is, let alone just like DeFi.
Yeah.
I mean, the TVL, I haven't checked recently, but it was like, I think on Ethereum or overall it was like between 2 and 300 billion. But the entire space fluctuates between like 1.5 and 2 trillion. But if you look at like the world's asset classes.
It's a drop in the ocean.
It's very, very small. And if it does consume, which I think you and I very much believe, there is so much room for growth. And it really is just the earliest days for DeFi and crypto as a whole. So it's super exciting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, arguments that I see against transaction costs, it's just the same thing as saying that Netflix would never take off because of buffering speeds in the early 2000s. Like it's on par with that.
100%. I totally agree. And I mean, one of the other things that I'm selfishly kind of interested in is you acquired a team on Solana and moved over there. I think I kind of believe outside of the product and what you choose to build in the space, choosing the correct like tech stack matters a lot. I don't know if you would agree or not, but how did you kind of come to choose, Ethereum and then start to look at other platforms as a whole?
The decision-making process for choosing Ethereum originally was it had the most developed smart contract capability, and then the widest set of talent to choose from to build it. So, you need to find infrastructure that you can actually build on that can support you. So we needed working smart contracts. And then you need to find people who are available who can actually build using that tech stack. So Solidity. So, Ethereum was a no-brainer from that perspective. And so we, constructed V1 of the protocol. We've launched. We will continue to build out Ethereum. So we're launching Pools V2 on Ethereum in April, May. And, we continue to view that as, a core part of our business. And then we're launching on Solana later this month, so March. And we view that as an exciting new market. And it was prompted by the desire from borrowers to improve the user experience of having lower transaction costs, and faster speeds. So we had hypothesized before that because we're dealing in, loans of tens of millions of dollars, that people didn't care about $1,000 of gas, but that actually wasn't the case. So in actuality, there's an analyst at these companies who are borrowing, who is churning through loans day to day, and who notices when, it costs them $1,000 in gas fees. So that prompted us to look and to evaluate where else could we build. And so we looked at what had a strong ecosystem. So Solana had, at the time, this was like November, December. There was about 15 to 17 billion TVL. And then it also had an ecosystem where you had native projects that were cropping up that were not just forks of other projects. And you had a good developing ecosystem and a lot of TradFi talent that was going across to found projects on there. And then you had good pillars of the Solana ecosystem who were providing consistent funding and backing and good public support. So you have Alameda and FTX, you had Jump, you have Multicoin. And so this meant that we could kind of count on the continued development there. And then I think that, the team was just very good at shipping. So you had things like downtime, but I view this as, it's like what we talked about, iteration. You have to sort of continue to push the bounds and break things.
Exactly.
And I think, philosophically, I actually feel like American teams just move much faster. So seeing a team that's kind of, like largely based in the US, kind of similar with Avalanche, like I think these teams will move faster. And so I'm actually kind of seeing over time the gap getting closed with some of the existing longer standing blockchains. And so then we looked at talent. So, to engineer on Solana, you need to have Rust. So it's a different tech stack. But what was really interesting was that Solana was one of the only blockchains that's doing parallel processing, which you and I have discussed a bit. But I think this is an interesting, diversified technological aspect that makes us fitter, like as a team. If we have this engineering capability to develop in Rust on Solana, we're more anti-fragile as a team because we're not wedded to a single knowledge base and single blockchain, or if we went to an EVM compatible one, a highly correlated blockchain as well. So we acquired Avari. We've now started to build out the Rust engineering team. So I would say we're healthier as an organization by having that diversity of talent. That was kind of a long-winded answer.
No.
But we're going to continue developing on both chains.
We
may. I think the future is multi-chain, and so I am interested on could we go and deploy on another EVM compatible chain and leverage say the speed of Avalanche. Subnets are an interesting capability.
I like the subnet architecture there. They're super interesting. But I think just the clarity and thought behind it and the decision-making process, super articulate. And
plus with the team that we acquired, effectively we're able to kind of structure this as a JV that aligns upside in the growth of Maple Solana with existing MPL holders. So that was really important for us.
Gotcha.
Because we were going to have a separate token for security reasons, and because I think having a separate token on its own chain is important. It's kind of like being a country in the European Union and you don't have control over your own monetary policy. So we saw how that impacted Greece. And if you have a different purchasing power parity, let's just use that as a metaphor for like liquidity mining on different chains. Then having monetary policy, which would be a singular token and singular token emission schedule, it's like a handicap, right? It's untenable.
I like that thought process. I think the most impressive thing after talking for almost 55 minutes has just been your clarity of thought behind the things and the ability to break down larger things into smaller things and then being able to execute on them, but not only execute on them, but execute in the right direction. That's impressive. You've done a lot. It's cool. So I think maybe to just kind of, we touched on quite a few things, but maybe just kind of to wrap it up for the last couple minutes.
Sure.
Is there anything in particular that is kind of like exciting you about like either Maple or like the entire crypto space that you're looking forward to over the next, say, like 6 months and then like a couple years out?
So I think, a few obvious things that are kind of related to Maple. So launch on Solana later this month.
Congrats.
Super excited about that.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. We are looking to penetrate other industry verticals that are within crypto before we then make the bridge outside of crypto to, fintech SaaS companies as users of the platform. on the borrow side. And so one of the things we're looking at a lot is mining, like and whether they could support a new borrowing vertical. And then we're actually working with another team that's poised to launch soon on Solana as well, which is Sega Protocol. So I can't really say much about it, but
some alpha right here.
But very, I think what we're launching with them is it's almost like liquidity launchpad for new teams that are launching. So you've seen governance token launchpads, but I don't think you've seen liquidity launchpads, which help bring the initial users and kind of productize the launch of liquidity and protocols. So that's something I'm pretty excited about. What am I looking at mostly in this space? Few trends I'm seeing. So I'm seeing more institutions come and participate in DeFi. So I think that, we're now having conversations with a lot of well-known TradFi institutions, and they're interested in what kind of projects can they do in DeFi, and what kind of proof of concepts they can do. So this has marked the shift from skepticism to interest in the space. And so I think, you'll probably see some very well-known institutions start, either running pools in DeFi or participating or providing liquidity in some way. And I think increasingly we're seeing a lot of talent kind of come in from Web2 tech companies. So I think DeFi is without a doubt, obviously I'm biased in saying this, but DeFi is without a doubt the most exciting space in tech at the moment. And I think there are a lot of tech companies, Web2 tech companies, that are setting up their own crypto teams. They won't make it because organizationally, they're not actually set up to endorse it. It's like GM trying to incubate an electric car. And so the idea that, Google is going to create a crypto team that,
I very much agree.
PayPal's crypto team, like, this is all equivalent in my view to Blockbuster trying to launch online videos.
I totally agree.
And so I just think organizationally they're not actually set up to accommodate and incubate this kind of innovation. So I think we'll start to see a lot more companies that are perhaps founded by people who are leaving those organizations to go and set up their own things. So I think that's super exciting too.
I think that's a perfect way to end it on. Culture wins, and it's will be interesting to see a super small kind of crypto industry as it is continue to become what it is going to become. There's a lot of room for growth.
A lot of growth.
For sure. Well, thank you, Sid. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Logan. Really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it.